Welcome to the Single Era Diaries, exploring the journey of a woman who hasn't experienced what it's like to be single in her entire adult life, and pretty much most of her teenage life too. Each episode will navigate the journey of finding a sense of identity, exploring the challenges of co-parenting, finding love of self and healing, all whilst tackling the complexities of the checkered landscape of dating and dating apps, meeting new people, and operating solo in a world that celebrates couples, marriage, and codependency. I am your host, founder of Nascent Media and newly single woman, Jade Graham, and this is the diary of my single era. So on this week's episode, I really want to talk about and dig into authenticity and what it means to actually be ourselves and to feel comfortable with being ourselves, especially in dating, but I mean really also in life as well. It's absolutely, I feel, one of the perils and pitfalls that we have with being human, that we are probably conditioned and absolutely start to internalize and believe that whoever it is that we are needs to be changed or needs to be something different in order to be accepted and appreciated by other people. And when it comes to dating and when it comes to finding a relationship, be that a romantic relationship or a new friendship or even an existing friendship, one that you're looking to rekindle, in all of those different dynamics, actually being your authentic self is so vital and so critical to how you're going to feel short, medium, and long term throughout that dynamic, but also how you're going to feel if things do progress to somewhere else beyond the initial stages of meeting somebody. And so I really have been thinking about this because being new to the dating scene and being new to the world of putting myself out there in a way that feels incredibly alien to me, at least in the personal space, because I have, of course, spent most of my adult life in relationships, I've really had to get to grips with the fact that putting yourself out there does come with a sense of feeling uncomfortable. And maybe this is not the same for everybody, but it's certainly the case for me that there have been a number of times in my life, largely in my career, definitely in some friendship dynamics, and on reflection in my past relationships, where I've really abandoned myself and I haven't been my true, authentic, effervescent, very bubbly, fairly loud, very happy, wanting to bounce off the walls with joy and glee, probably 97% of the time self. And so the challenge that I'm finding currently, and I'm sure this will be relatable for many people who are entering or dipping their toe into the dating world, is that the version of you that you're putting out there is perhaps a version of you that's been hidden for some time. Maybe it's a version of you that you have tried to shrink down, particularly if you've been in a partnership or a relationship or a marriage where you over time began to feel that the things that you're into and the things that make you you weren't compatible with that relationship. And from personal experience, that is very much what happened to me. I'm sure so many people will feel the same, where you get to the end of a relationship and you kind of take a little bit of time to recalibrate and to get to know who you are again. If it's been a long-term relationship, there are parts of ourselves that we put aside or we don't fully integrate. And as a result of that, we become a slightly or even a completely different person. And this can happen in a variety of walks of life. I know beyond my romantic relationships and partnerships that I've absolutely had friendship dynamics over the years where I've really not being my true authentic self. And I think there's one period that really does spring to mind for me, and it's a prime example of not being your authentic self. And so around a decade ago, before I had my Saturn return and quit my corporate job in a big four and flew out to Ibiza to go and find myself for the season, I had a group of friends that were met through my now ex-partner, and I still very vividly recall how uncomfortable I felt every time I was in any kind of situation where I would be out with them or around at their house or having dinner. I pretty much consistently felt like I couldn't be myself, that I had to dress a certain way, act a certain way, speak a certain way, and that in doing so, I would be accepted. I would be accepted into this group of women who were a very long standing group of friends. I was the outsider coming into it. And I really did believe that if I rounded some of the edges off and behaved in a slightly different way, that they would like me. And the truth is, they did like me. Our friendship was, for the time that it was a friendship, and bearing in mind this is before I escaped to Ibiza and then moved to Manchester, the time that I was friends with them, it was a really lovely friendship, but I still vividly remember feeling like I didn't belong and that I wasn't being my authentic self. Now, how does this relate to dating? Well, there's a pattern of behaviour that we can adopt as people where throughout our lives we have received conditioning or feedback or criticism that has somehow led us to internalize that we aren't enough in who we are, that what we are being and how we behave is for some reason not acceptable to the people that are around us. And if that pattern of behaviour is something that you have, as I'm quite sure many people do, adopt in order to feel a part of the tribe, a part of the group, which again is a very human thing to do because we're wired for connection and we're wired to want to be a part of the group, a part of the whole. That is very much the essence of what it is to be human. But if you have spent a number of times where you have abandoned yourself to some degree in order to fit in, if you've shrunk yourself, if you've changed aspects of yourself, then if that pattern exists, then it is something that can really show up when it comes to putting yourself out there to meet a new romantic partner. So let me just give this a little more colour and context with the whole dating app world that I still continue to exist in at the moment. And it is a lot less hideous than it has been. But in terms of how you're presenting yourself, you are putting yourself into a box. You're trying to showcase who you are. And on the app that I'm using, Hinge, which I've mentioned before on earlier podcasts, there's not a great deal of space for you to really articulate who you are and what you're about. There are some prompts, there's some area where you can expand on things that you might like, but in the most part, you're creating a visual store window. It's a little like the window at Selfridges. You're creating this beautiful visually merchandised display of who you are in order to attract like-minded people. The challenge with that, of course, is that if you're not yet comfortable with being your whole authentic self, when it comes to communicating with people, either on the app or if you move into the off-app space where you start having chats on WhatsApp or whatever other means, if you're not fully comfortable with being yourself, and if what you have presented as being the store window is a version of you, what do you think is going to happen when it actually comes to meeting people? And so I've really been wrangling with this because currently I find myself having some really lovely connections and exchanges with guys, and I'm really having to coach myself to simply be myself. And I think that part of the reason for that is because I have, as shared, spent a number of years where I have sought to shrink myself to feel like I belong, to feel like I'm accepted. And I've also received a great deal of conditioning, which I have absolutely internalized and have to work on a near daily basis, that who I am isn't enough, that the way that I behave and the way that I think is in some way too much. And so the situation that I currently find myself in is that I am, as a person, anybody that's listening to this that knows me knows that I am very excitable, very effervescent, very bubbly, have lots to say, lots of words, lots of opinions, lots of point of view. But in the most part, I am really all about being as joyous and as happy as possible. I firmly live by the belief that we're here for a good time, not a long time, and that having fun whilst you're doing pretty much everything is really the way in which I would ideally live every day. Of course, the world can be slightly more challenging than that, and situations and relationships can, of course, cause that joy and that shine to dim somewhat. But in the context of dating and meeting people who don't know me, they don't know me beyond what I have presented on a profile. They know very little about me or my style or my personality. They only know what they have had access to through the app. And for the very few people that I have allowed into my sort of social media world, which is on one part very public, and then there's another side that's quite private. Beyond that, that's all they see. It's a fairly one-dimensional point of view. And so when it comes to having these exchanges and talking about meeting people and dating and going for a drink or going for dinner, my natural reaction, because I am a really excitable person, is to be like really excitable. I'm absolutely an all-in person, and I'm sure there'll be people listening to this who can really relate to that. Like, if you're somebody that gives 110% to everything that you do, you pour into it, your energy's in it, and you're just a naturally effervescent, energetic person, then you might find yourself doing what I've been doing, which is really questioning as to whether you're being too much. And so the uncharted territory, which is what I 100% find myself in, the uncharted territory of meeting connections in a life sense as opposed to a business sense, is so alien and so challenging. And doing that in a way where I'm being authentic to me and to who I am and to what my personality style is a real challenge, because it's a constant game of guessing back and forth. Is that too much? Have I texted too much? Have I responded too quickly? Have I responded too slowly? Is it too early to text? Is it too late to text? And all of these thoughts, because you're dealing with another person who is, for all intents and purposes, a stranger. You don't know each other. If this is the pre-date stage, or even if it's in the early date stage, you don't actually know each other. You know a version of each other. And so if you have ever, as I have, experienced confidence issues, self-worth issues, if you have ever, as I have through this separation process, experienced betrayal and infidelity, which has really made you question your worth and really has the capacity to really chip away at that sense of self-worth. If you've been in that situation, then I believe that questioning yourself is completely natural. And in fact, I would argue that even if you haven't had that still questioning yourself is probably something that we all do. Like, we all have that voice in our head, right? The critic, the inner critic. What I'm finding, however, is that to be your authentic self means that you need to become really comfortable with who you are. And that means good parts and the not so good parts, the parts that are evolved and developed and the parts that need some work. But to be authentic, you need to firstly know who you are and what it is that you believe and what it is that you represent. And that can only really come with doing the work in order to give yourself the grace and space to be who you are. I guess as an elder millennial, I know that my point of view and my perspective on who I am has shaped up to be far different from that I had when I got into my last relationship. As an early 20-something-year-old entering that early relationship, I was about as crushed and lost as you could get. I didn't have a strong sense of identity. I felt like an enormous failure having not made it into the creative industries, which were industries that I'd set out to work in since I was about 9 or 10 years of age. I felt lost. I felt disappointed to be back in the Midlands. I felt like I had failed. And so all of those facets were my internal narrative and my story. But at the other side of that now, having come out of that 16-year relationship, I'm now going out into the world to meet people and to meet new people and to meet new guys and new men and to get to know them and to let them get to know me. But in order to do that, I have to be comfortable with me. And I would argue that for those of you that are listening, you need to get comfortable with you too. You need to get to know who you are and what it is that you believe in and what your personality traits are and how you show up in the world and what it is that you like and what it is that you don't like. I think when it comes to meeting new people, in order to be your authentic self, you have to be comfortable with who your authentic self is. And that takes time and it takes work, but it's time and work that are so worthwhile giving to yourself. Because what's the alternative? If you show up as some other version of you, if you believe that you have to dress a certain way or act a certain way, if you believe that what you do for work isn't interesting enough or what you make isn't enough, if you think that where you live isn't the kind of place that somebody would think highly of, all of these different conditioning traits that we have as people where we judge ourselves and we judge others, they can be so dangerous if we then take those things and reshape ourselves to be a version that isn't truly us. Because here's the thing, and this is speaking from experience, and this is the experience that I had in that friendship group. I would show up as a different version of who I am. I would not fully be myself. And at the end of every exchange, I felt so completely and utterly exhausted. At the end of every time that I would go out or go for drinks or go for a meal, or I just felt exhausted because it was exhausting. It was exhausting not being fully who I am. And so the same has to be said for dating. If it's at the stage where you're still talking on the app, if it's the stage where you're talking over WhatsApp, if it's the stage where you're talking on the phone, if it's the stage where you're talking in person, you have to be who you are. The Oscar Wilde quote always stays so boldly in my mind when I think about authenticity. The one where he says, be yourself, because everybody else is taken. And I really think that we all have to embody that. We all need to take that on and to say, yeah, I have got to be who I am. Now, that's not to say that you can't work on things within yourself or that there aren't areas for development. I mean, none of us are completely finished articles. We're all worked in progress, right? And so there might be aspects of yourself, of ourselves, that we think, yeah, okay, so I need to maybe work on that a little bit, or maybe I am being a bit overly keen, or maybe, yeah, there can be a whole different range of different things that we can choose to work on, but that doesn't mean that we're not us. And it shouldn't mean that we aren't us, because here's the thing. If you're putting on a front, if you're trying to be a different version of who you actually are, if you're trying to gloss yourself up or do yourself down, if you're trying to puff yourself up or make yourself small, if you're speaking in a different way, acting in a different way, dressing in a different way in order to fit into a certain world or realm, what do you think is going to happen as time develops and time goes on? And that's even if it does get to that point. I think most of us can figure out when somebody's being authentic or not. We get this kind of gut feeling, don't we, as to whether somebody, is being fake or whether they're being real. And I think if you are meeting new people and you're giving off an energy that says that you're not comfortable with yourself and you're not fully being yourself, then the other person will pick that up. Self-confidence and inner worth is work that some of us have to do more than others. Some of us have had experiences in our formative years or our teenage years or our 20s, our 30s. If you're listening to this and you're older, you might even still experience the sense of having to change who you are. But so naturally, given that I am in this dating world now, I've done a little bit of research and I'm going to share it with you too, because if you're also dating right now, being authentic and being yourself is just the key. It's the key to finding the relationship, the friendship, the dynamic, the partnership, whatever it is that you're going out there with the intention of having. By being yourself, that's how you're going to attract the relationship that aligns with that. And it's only through being yourself. If you're going to be yourself, you have to first of all be honest. You have to be honest with who you are, and you have to kind of own that. And you've really got to relax and just know that all of this is to be human and it's to have fun. Meeting new people is fun. It should be fun. It should feel fun. And so being yourself and just relaxing with it is absolutely essential. And I think also dressing in a way that you feel comfortable. So if, for example, this hasn't happened by the way, but if, for example, if I was invited out on a date to like a really top class restaurant, I would not feel comfortable on that first date because I'm an artsy woman. Like, I like to go to places that just feel quite cool and laid back and relaxed. Like, I wouldn't want to go to a Michelin star restaurant for that first meeting, that first date, because I would just feel really uncomfortable. I would feel like I can't be my full whole self. Whereas if it's like a cool cantina or a bar or just somewhere where you can kind of just chill, then I know that I can dress the way that I want to dress and I know that I can feel pretty relaxed with it. I would also say, having done a little bit of research on this in terms of how to be yourself, really resist pretending. I don't know whether you've ever had this. I know I've had this where I have been around certain people. My corporate career was absolutely somewhere where I'd feel like this, because in corporate environments, and particularly if you're at a pretty senior level, which I was for the majority of my corporate career, I was operating in and amongst, directors and C-suite directors, like very senior, serious people. And I would have to pretend. I'm not sure that have to is the right frame or the right phrasing, but I felt like I had to pretend. I felt like I had to be somebody different and somebody else in order to fit into that world, because I am an effervescent ball of fun. And effervescent balls of fun don't run around leading projects with executive teams. Or maybe they do, I just didn't encounter very many of them. So resist the urge to pretend. Be who, don't put something on. Don't speak in a different way. Don't act in a certain way. Don't be something different from who you are, because it will be exhausting and the date will not be fun. And if the date does progress past that first date, I'm sounding like an expert here and I'm absolutely not, but I just figure that this is what I would advise people in the space of business. Like, be who you are. I think the last thing is to have a really positive mindset. Like, give yourself a pep talk before you go on the date. I'm a really big fan of affirmations and meditations and positive self-talk. And I have to start my day every day with affirmations. I have to end my day with affirmations. And all of these are affirming positive statements to reinforce positive thinking into your mind. And it's so vital. If you have experienced negativity, or if you have ever received bullying or critique or criticism, if you've internalized those narratives and you've started to believe that you're not enough, then I cannot recommend affirmations enough. because it's essentially reprogramming your subconscious mind. And I feel that before you go into the dating scene, or even continuing as you're in the dating scene, to actually do some positive self-talk. Let yourself know that you're attractive, you're desirable, you're fun, you're great to be around, you're a catch. Like, say all of those things to yourself, and crucially, believe them. And I think the final piece that I would say with this is that at whatever stage you are at in the dating journey, the relationship journey, the meeting new people journey, wherever you're at, trust that the right person and the right people are going to find you, and you're going to be found by them. I'm a really firm believer that we meet the people in our lives that we're supposed to meet, and that the people that are here and our kind of people, they're out there. I mean, admittedly, it's a much wider ballpark than it used to be when you just, like I did in my old life. You meet people through your work, you meet people through your studying, you meet people through your town. Now we have dating apps and we can meet people wherever in the world. But that aside, when it comes down to being with whoever it is, I'm a firm believer that the people that are meant to be in your life will find you. And I think that there's something really magical about that and something really beautiful about that. But it's also something that I hope will give you some comfort, as well as me, to know that whoever it is that you are is more than enough for the people that are supposed to be in your life. And the people that are there and meant to love you are going to love you, warts and all, because we've all got flaws and we've all got things that we need to work on and things that aren't the finished article. And whoever it is that you're going to meet, they're going to have warts and all too. But if they're your person, it doesn't matter. It really won't matter. Your people will be your people, and you will build those connections and those relationships, firstly by putting yourself out there, which you have got to do in order to meet people. You can't hide behind your phone. You have to get out into the world. But you will also find them by being your authentic self. So I encourage everybody listening, and this is a message to myself as well, to know that you're enough and to be who you are. Be that fizzy, sulky, grumpy sometimes, doesn't matter. Be who you are, because your people are going to love you regardless, and your people are your people. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up another episode of the Single Era Diaries, and I hope to have a few more tales to tell on the forthcoming episodes. But as ever, thank you for listening. I appreciate every single person that is listening to this show. I am loving the feedback and the really kind words. And look, if this is helping you on your journey, then it's so worth it. So here's to the single era, and as ever, date safely. Peace out. The Single Era Diaries is produced and distributed by Nascent Media and executive produced by me, Jade Graham. Podcasts grow by being liked and shared, so if you enjoyed today's show, then please be sure to like and share with a friend who you think will enjoy the show too. Subscribe, and if you have a moment to rate and review wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, that would be super appreciated too. Thank you for listening, and peace out.